Hey guys, I'm April from Giggle Glitter Graphics, and today we are starting a free 8-week series called Written in Ink. This journal making series tells the story of a writer who is experiencing a serious case of writer's block and has a deadline approaching. Their mentor reaches out with a little assistance, and that is when the magic happens. This is a free project series that is going out to my email list, so each Friday I'll be sending a new part of the story and guiding you through building the interactive journal pages. If you're not on the email list and would like to join us, just use the link in the description down below to sign up and get this project sent to you immediately. So let's go over some of the supplies that you'll need for part 1 of Written in Ink. You'll need a pair of scissors to cut everything out, liquid glue with a fine point. I like to use Beacon Fabri-Tac. A glue stick will help for a lot of this. I don't know how much I will use it. I like my Fabri-Tac for videos, but I prefer Uhu glue stick when I use a glue stick. You're also going to need a bookbinding kit or equivalent, so you'll need something to punch holes through your paper. You're going to need a couple clips or paper clips, a large needle, and something to stitch your pages together with. That could be waxed bookbinding thread, it could be embroidery floss, anything about that weight will work. An optional item you might like to use is vintage photo distress ink. I'm using that on the edge of all of my pieces except for a couple today, and let me look for those. Here we go. So I have these 3 pieces. We're going to tear some of these edges, so I'm not going to bother putting the ink on ahead of time because I'll just tear it off. So these 3 pieces I don't ink, but everything else is getting distress ink around the edges. Another optional item is a stapler. I'm only going to use 1 or 2 staples just to add a little something extra to one of the page elements. And then also optionally, you might like to have a bone folder. These come in a bookbinding kit, so if you pick up a kit, you probably have one of these already. And you might also find a scoreboard handy for pre-creasing all of your pieces and a paper trimmer to trim off the edges of things like these white borders that are going to be on our papers. So these are just some things that you could pick up if you want to. I do have a shopping list for this series that you can find in the link in the description down below, so check that out if you would like to do a little shopping. Now let's talk about printing. I print on 110-pound cardstock and 32-pound paper. Almost everything that I provide you with is marked with which one of these you should print on. It'll be at the top and sometimes the side of the page if the page was kind of taken up by too many elements. There will also be a note if something needs to be printed on the reverse side, and the only mandatory piece is the cardstock page that has this little notebook element. That one you definitely want to print the back side of. You can use either paper 1 or paper 2 on the back. They're both similar. It doesn't matter which one you use. So go ahead and do that. And then there are 3 other pages that are optional. The backs of these little notes, the back of the envelope, and the back of the letter. And that's just to make it feel a little more finished, and it's not mandatory. Pages that do not have cardstock or paper written on them are our larger pages. So we've got the cover panel. This is printed on 110-pound cardstock, and I have printed the flip side with paper 2. Either paper is fine. It doesn't make a difference. So this is on cardstock. And then you'll want 2 copies with paper 1 on one side and paper 2 on the other. Again, it does not really matter, but I like to mix it up with the textures just a little bit. This is a background for all of our decorations. So 2 copies, 2 pieces of 32-pound paper with the front and back printed with paper 1 and paper 2. And this is what's going to make up our journal. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is trim off these white edges, and then we can start building our journal. All right, so I have my pages all trimmed and I have folded them in half. So here is my cover. This is where the bone folder comes in handy because being able to use this to smooth down the heavier cardstock makes it easier, but you can use your thumbnail or the back of your scissors. And then I have the other 2 pages trimmed up and folded in half. I used the vintage photo distress ink on the edge of the cover because the white edges can be kind of stark against all this bright printed color. So that's just a little finishing technique that you can use if you want. And I left the pages alone because they're lighter in color and the white edge didn't bother me too much. So now I have my pages. I'm going to nest one paper inside of the other. And then I'm going to nest those right inside of my cover. And that is going to make us a little book. So you should be able to page through this pretty easily, like so. And then I have included this optional template. This is going to make punching your holes evenly easier. If you want to wing it and don't put this in, that's totally fine. You can punch your holes even-ish. But if you are someone who likes things to be symmetrical, go ahead and print this template out on cardstock and then give it a little fold in half so that you can use the dots to punch your holes through the entire book. So I'm going to go ahead and line this all up. This is where my clips come in handy. You can use paper clips. This is fairly thin. I have binder clips today, which are actually probably a little overkill. But I'm going to pop those on. I'm going to keep this fairly folded when I put them on. If you open it flat, things can shift around a little bit. So get them nested nice and tight and pop your clips on. I like to stagger them so they're not running into each other. And then grab your template and nestle it right down inside. Center it up. Next, I'm going to grab my little pokey tool and I'm going to poke through where each of these dots are on my template. So making sure this hasn't shifted, and you can add more clips if you need to. I'm just going to push straight through, and I like to push through pretty far. This is tapered, so I want to make sure I get to some of the wider bits so my needle goes through evenly. So I'm going to repeat that for each of these other holes. One more. And there we go. Now I can put this template to the side and leave my clips on. Next, I'm going to grab, I'm using brown embroidery floss today. You can use bookbinding thread, twine, baker's twine, anything about this weight. And I'm going to measure out about 3 lengths of this, the length being the height of your journal. So 1, 2, 3. And I'm just going to trim that off. And I'm going to get my needle. This is a large needle that came in my bookbinding kit. And I'm just going to thread that really quickly. And there we go. So I'm going to actually start on the outside of my journal today in the center hole. And that's going to leave the strings on the outside. They'll hang down. There'll be a nice extra detail. I could maybe put some charms or something on them. But I'm going to go down through the hole from the outside. Make sure it goes through all of your pages all the way to the inside. And then we want to make sure that we're leaving a long tail because we're going to need to tie a knot. And you can adjust this a little after you've gone through a couple of times. And let me grab, I've got dark thread on a dark background. So this will be a little easier to see. Here we go. So I've come in the middle. I'm going to go up to the top and go back through to the outside. I'm going to come all the way down and go through that bottom hole and go back to the inside. And then we're going to go back through the middle hole. Make sure everything is nice and tight. I'm going to go back through this middle hole. And now make sure you pull your loose tail off to the side nice and tight so that you don't poke through that thread. If you poke through this tail, it's not fun trying to tie your knot. It gets a little wonky. So I have 2 very different lengths of tails. My ending tail is a little longer, so I'm going to adjust this by just pulling it out and redoing the tension on this. And you want to make sure it's pretty tight, but don't get aggressive with it because we're not working with a ton of material here, so you could tear a hole. Mine feels pretty good. Once you get your tails to pretty close in length, make sure they are on opposite sides of this center string. So here is my center string. And then one tail is off to one side and one the other, because when we tie this knot, we're going to trap that center string. And then just do a little right over left, left over right, which I believe is our preferred knot. If it's not, leave a comment. Let me know if there's a better knot for this, but there we go. Nice tight knot. We've got some cute little strings hanging off now, and I'm going to leave mine long. Embellishments I like to leave until the end, so I might put some charms or something in part 8, but for now I'm going to leave those be. I'm not even going to trim them. I want to make sure I have plenty of room. I can take my clips off, and now we have a nice book that we can start decorating. So I've got all of my other pieces already cut out and prepared, and I'm going to turn and work on the inside cover first. So we're going to build a pocket here. So this little book piece with the ankle is going to become a pocket, and I'm going to use my Beacon Fabri-Tac just to put a thin line of glue around these three sides, the straight sides here, and I'm going to leave the top and the angle open. So I'm just going to put a thin line of glue, not too much, you don't want it to get too messy, on those three sides. And then I want to pop this in kind of centered on the panel. There'll be a little gap on the left and right, and then I like to leave a little space at the bottom so that it floats. I find it's just a little more visually appealing, and it's a personal preference. Next, I've got this little strip and an oval. Ink turns thoughts into worlds. And we're going to use this strip as a piece of tape, and I'm just going to tear the ends off so I have a nice rough edge. And you want it to be the right size to kind of span this entire space with just a little bit of room on each side. So something like that. And I'm going to grab my distress ink and put a little ink on the ends of that just so that they jump off the page a bit more. And this little stripe is going to go underneath this label. So we're going to want to set it low enough on the page that our label is going to fit on top of it. So I'm going to just put a little bead of glue on the back of this. You can use your glue stick for this step if you want. I'm going to try to get this on pretty straight, right about there. Let's check that placement. That looks good. And then I'm just going to glue my label right on top of it. And I'll do my best to center that up as well. I have this cup of tea and paper and pen, and we're going to make a little tuck spot here. So we don't want to glue this all the way down. We're going to glue just the edge here, kind of a semicircle, and maybe inward just a little bit, because we're going to tuck a piece of paper in here in a little bit. So I'm going to flip this. I'm going to kind of run in a semicircle, and it's going to be generous because we don't want this to pop off the page. So my glue has gone around kind of the paper area here. So now I can tuck something inside of there if I want to. So while that's drying, let's go ahead and work on a couple of things for our pocket. We'll move this off to the side. And I want to work on the envelope. So there are 3 different labels, and I'll get to those in a minute. You have a letter. I have printed mine on the back with the speckled paper and then folded it so it's going to fit inside of this envelope. My folds, just so you can see, I did put some ink on them so you can see where I folded it, right above the first paragraph, and then I folded it. It's on this sentence here where it says speech. If you've already sent the manuscript, I folded right in the middle of that. You can adjust your folds however you like, but if you're unsure, that's my little guideline for you as to what's going to fit in there. And I've got my envelope. To build the envelope, you're going to need to fold it along the 4 lines. And again, I have printed the inside of mine so that when you open it up, it looks finished, and that's optional. And you're going to fold in these 2 little sides. And then we're going to fold up the bottom and glue that to it. So I'm going to run my glue on this flap right where it's going to touch those tabs. I'm going to try not to over glue. I might have done that, just a little bit too much glue. Take some off. But now I can press that into place to make our envelope, like so. I'm going to flip this over. And I have 3 options for you for an address label. We have a masculine name, Oliver Henshaw. We have a feminine name, Allison Henshaw. And then I've left a blank label. So if you wanted to make your own label, put your own name and address on here, however you like, you can do that. So you can pick whichever option you want. And I'm going to go with Allison, I think, is my main character. And I'm just going to glue this right on. I'm going to put it on at kind of a jaunty angle because I like that. And I would recommend if you're using a glue stick, that would be best so that you can glue all these edges down and there's nothing that gets caught later on. Otherwise, if you're using liquid glue, that's fine. Just make sure you get it to kind of all the edges so that there's nothing to catch on later. And I'm going to just take my extra labels and put those to the side. I'm not going to need those. And now I have my letter folded up. I'm just going to tuck that right down in here and get my envelope closed. And I'm going to place that into my pocket. Now we have one more little element to go on this page. We have this piece of paper that says just right. And mine has some printing on the back of it. And I'm just going to rough this up a bit. I'm going to tear all of the edges. I want this to feel like a note, a frustrated note that our main character wrote to themselves. And then they were just disgusted with it and threw it in the trash or something like that. So we're going to tear all the edges on this note. And then I'm actually going to take mine and kind of crumple it up like it got thrown away. I'm going to open that back up and let's hit that with a little bit of distress ink just to make it a little more exciting. You can even do some of the little creases. And then I'm going to take my kind of scrunchy note and I'm going to jam it into our tuck here and let it poke out. So we have this cute little element that expresses our main character's frustration with themselves and the entire writing process. Now we have our facing page and we have a couple of rows of books and our first journal entry. I'm going to put the journal entry to the side for now. And I'm going to grab these book panels and I'm going to tear these again. So you can see I've made them a little over large so that you had some material to work with. And this is just going to add a little more life and interest to the journal instead of everything being totally clean and neat and straight lines. We have these rough creative edges. And you can do just 3 of them and line it up at the bottom, or you can tear all 4 sides and do it that way. I think I'm going to do 3 sides and I'll put some ink on that in a moment. I'm going to repeat this for the top one. And we're going to be doing a lot of this throughout this project, just these scrappy, fun pieces. And I encourage you, if you have things laying around the house that you want to add in to build even more layers, you can absolutely do that. So if you maybe have some ribbon or something that you want to add to this, I encourage you to do that. Make this project your own. Here, I'm just going to hit these all with some ink just to pop those edges out. You can also leave them as raw paper if you like the white edges. And then again, this is a place where a glue stick, this page in particular, a glue stick might serve you a little better. I am going to use my Fabri-Tac because it's quick and it's a little cleaner for my workspace. I end up getting glue stick all over everything and then I'm having to clean up too much instead of showing you what to do. So I'm just going to line that all the way up at the bottom and then again at the top. And this could be a preference thing. I do like when there's a little flutter to my edges. It makes it feel more scrappy, where if you use the glue stick and paste it all the way down, things can feel a lot flatter and sometimes a little less interesting. And now we are going to put our journal entry in right on top of that. And I'm going to glue this all the way down. So I'm just going to go around all my edges. And again, glue stick if you want to. And then I'm going to center this up on the page. And this is it for the first week of Written in Ink. I hope you are as excited about this series as I am. For the next 7 weeks, we are going to be doing one page at a time, and each page is going to get another journal entry. And I've designed them so that the journal entries, instead of being like this front and center, that you have to dig for them. You have to uncover the journal entries so that it is dynamic and interesting to look at. So I hope that you're going to join me for this full series. If you have not, go ahead and sign up for the email list to get this sent to you immediately to your inbox, and I will see you in the next video.